What if I told you that beneath the most desolate place on earth lies a secret so profound that it could rewrite everything we think we know about human history, about civilizations that came before us, about the very nature of our planet itself? Take a moment now, wherever you are listening to this, whether you're nestled in bed as the evening light fades, or perhaps walking through your neighborhood as the world grows quiet around you. I wonder, what time is it where you are right now? And what draws you to mysteries like this one? There's something about the unknown that calls to us in these quiet moments. Isn't there something that makes us lean closer when we hear whispers of secrets hidden just beyond our reach? Tonight, we're going to journey together to the most remote continent on our planet, to Antarctica, a place so vast and so silent that it feels like traveling to another world entirely, where the wind carries stories that are millions of years old, and where beneath miles of pristine ice, something ancient might be waiting, something that has been sleeping far longer than human civilization has existed. Picture this frozen realm. For a moment, imagine standing at the edge of an ice sheet that stretches beyond every horizon, where the silence is so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat echoing in the crystalline air, where the landscape seems to breathe with the weight of time itself, and where every snowflake that falls becomes part of a story that began long before the first human ever looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond the known world. This is Antarctica, not just a continent, but a keeper of secrets, a place where the normal rules of existence seem suspended, where time moves differently, where the very ice beneath your feet holds memories of epochs when this frozen wasteland was something entirely different, perhaps. Something green and alive, perhaps. Something that once knew the footsteps of beings we have yet to imagine. But what if Antarctica's greatest secret isn't hidden in its future, but buried in its past? What if beneath those endless white expanses lies evidence of a world that existed before the ice came before? The great freeze that turned a living continent into the Earth's most beautiful and terrifying graveyard. The story begins not with maps or expeditions, not with the brave souls who first set foot on this frozen shore, but with the continent itself, with its journey through time, with the slow, cosmic dance that brought it to the bottom of our world and then buried it beneath ice so thick that it could swallow entire mountain ranges without leaving a trace. Close your eyes for a moment and travel back with me, back not just years or centuries, but millions upon millions of years, to a time when our planet was young and restless, when continents drifted across the surface like islands on a vast blue ocean, carried by forces so powerful and so patient that they could move mountains as easily as we might rearrange furniture in a room. Once, long ago, Antarctica was not alone at the bottom of the world. It was part of something magnificent and vast called Gondwana, a supercontinent that stretched across what we now call the southern hemisphere, where lush forests grew under warm skies, where rivers flowed toward oceans that no longer exist, where life flourished in forms that would seem alien to us now, and where, perhaps, just perhaps, intelligence of some kind first learned to shape the world around it. Imagine those ancient forests, not the familiar trees of our modern world, but massive ferns that towered like cathedrals, cycads with fronds that whispered in winds that carried the scent of flowers that bloomed before bees existed to pollinate them, And in the shadows of these prehistoric groves, creatures that moved with purpose, creatures that might have built, creatures that might have known things about this planet that we are only now beginning to rediscover. The great splitting began. Slowly, so slowly, that a human lifetime would have passed without noticing any change, but the Earth was patient and persistent, and over millions of years, the tectonic plates that carried Gondwana began to separate, like pieces of a vast puzzle being gently pulled apart by invisible hands. South America drifted north, and West Africa moved toward its current position. Australia began its long journey toward Asia and Antarctica. Antarctica began its slow migration toward the South Pole, carrying with it whatever secrets it had accumulated during those warm, green millions of years. As Antarctica settled into its polar position, something profound began to happen. The climate shifted. The warm currents that had kept it temperate were cut off by the changing geography of the ocean floor. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the ice began to form, not all at once, not in a single dramatic freeze, but gradually, like a blanket, being pulled over a sleeping giant, covering first the highest peaks, then the valleys, then the coastlines, until finally, the entire continent disappeared beneath a shroud of ice so thick that it became like a white sarcophagus, preserving whatever lay beneath in a state of perfect frozen suspension. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It took millions of years for Antarctica to become the frozen continent we know today, millions of years during which any life that had evolved there would have had to adapt to increasingly harsh conditions, would have had to find ways to survive the gradual cooling, the lengthening winters, the advancing ice sheets that consumed everything in their path with the inexorable patience of geological time. Think about what this means. If intelligent life had evolved during Antarctica's warm period, it would have witnessed the slow death of its world, would have watched as familiar landscapes disappeared beneath advancing glaciers, would have seen the oceans freeze and the forests die, and would have had to make choices about how to preserve whatever knowledge and culture they had developed during their civilization's flowering. Some might have fled to other continents, carrying with them memories and maps and stories of the Greenland they had left behind. Others might have chosen to stay, to adapt, to find ways to survive in the changing climate, and perhaps some chose a third option, to hide their most precious knowledge and artifacts beneath the advancing ice, knowing that the frozen continent would become a perfect preservation chamber, keeping their legacy safe until some future age when the ice might retreat and their secrets could be discovered by minds capable of understanding their significance. The ice that covered Antarctica was not uniform. It accumulated in layers over millions of years, each layer recording the climate conditions of its time like pages in a vast frozen library. And as modern scientists have learned to read these ice cores, they have discovered that Antarctica's climate history is far more complex and dynamic than anyone previously imagined. There were periods of warming and cooling times when the ice retreated, and advanced epochs when parts of the continent might have been habitable even after the Great Freeze began. During these warmer interludes, Antarctica might have hosted refugee populations from other parts of the world, groups of humans or pre-humans who were fleeing ice ages in the northern hemisphere, or perhaps even more, ancient forms of intelligence that had learned to follow the cycles of climate change, moving from continent to continent as conditions changed, always staying one step ahead of the advancing ice, carrying with them the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that rose and fell with the great climate cycles that govern our planet's long history. Consider the implications of this. If Antarctica served as a refuge during certain periods, then its ice cores might contain more than just climate data. They might contain artifacts, tools, even organic remains of beings who lived there during these brief, warm periods, evidence that could revolutionize our understanding of how long intelligent life has existed on Earth and what forms it might have taken during the vast stretches of time before recorded history began. The continent's geological structure adds another layer to this mystery. Beneath the ice lies not just rock, but a complex landscape of valleys and mountains and plains that would be perfectly capable of supporting cities if those cities were built to withstand the gradual onset of an ice age, if they were constructed with materials and techniques that could survive being buried beneath miles of ice for millions of years, if their builders understood that they were creating not just homes for their own generation, but time capsules for future discoverers who might not arrive for eons. And here's where the story becomes truly intriguing, because while Antarctica was undergoing this transformation from a living continent to a frozen vault, something remarkable was happening in other parts of the world. Knowledge was being preserved, maps were being drawn, stories were being told, and some of this knowledge seemed to include information about lands that should have been impossible for ancient peoples to know about, including detailed information about the coastlines of Antarctica itself. But here's where our story becomes truly mysterious, because while Antarctica was undergoing this transformation from a living continent to a frozen vault, human civilization was still millions of years in the future. The earliest human ancestors were still tiny creatures scurrying through African forests. Writing hadn't been invented, cities didn't exist, and yet there are maps, ancient maps, that seem to show Antarctica as it was before, the ice maps that were drawn by hands that should never have known such a place existed. The most famous of these is the Piri Race map, discovered in 1929 in the old imperial palace in Constantinople, drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral whose name it bears, and showing with startling accuracy not just the coastlines of South America and Africa, but also what appears to be the northern coast of Antarctica, not as we know it today, buried beneath miles of ice, but as it might have appeared when the land was free, and the mountains stood naked under open skies. Think about this for a moment. In 1513, Antarctica had not yet been officially discovered by European explorers. That wouldn't happen for another 300 years, and yet here was a map, carefully drawn by a skilled cartographer, showing details of the Antarctic coastline that modern satellite mapping has confirmed to be remarkably accurate. But how could this be possible? How could anyone in the 16th century have known the shape of a continent that lay hidden beneath ice thicker than the tallest skyscrapers? In the most remote corner of the world, Piri Reis himself provided a clue in notes written on the map itself. He explained that he had compiled it from many older sources, from maps that had been passed down through generations, from charts that claimed to trace their origins back to the time of Alexander the Great, and even further, to sources that hinted at knowledge preserved from civilizations that were ancient, even to the ancient world, knowledge that spoke of lands beyond the known horizon, of continents that balanced the earth, of places where the sun behaved differently and the stars followed strange paths across unfamiliar skies. The accuracy of the Piri race map is disturbing in its implications. Modern analysis has shown that it depicts the Antarctic coastline not as it appears today, but as it would appear if the ice were removed, revealing bays and inlets and geographical features that are currently buried under ice sheets that have been in place for millions of years. This suggests that whoever originally surveyed Antarctica and created the source maps did so at a time when the continent was at least partially ice-free, which, according to current geological understanding, would place there observations millions of years before human civilization was supposed to have existed. But the Piri race map is not the only ancient document that contains impossible knowledge. The Orontius Phineas map of 1531 shows Antarctica as a complete continent with mountain ranges, rivers, and coastlines depicted in remarkable detail. The Mercator map of 1569 shows Antarctica divided by a strait that modern exploration has confirmed does exist beneath the ice, and the Boucher map of 1754 shows Antarctica as two separate landmasses connected by an ice bridge, which again has been confirmed by modern seismic studies of the continent's subglacial topography. These maps suggest a tradition of knowledge that was passed down through many cultures over many centuries, knowledge that traced its origins back to sources so ancient that they predate not just written history, but human civilization as we understand it, and this raises profound questions about who might have originally surveyed Antarctica when this knowledge was first recorded, and how it managed to survive through all the chaos and destruction of human history to eventually appear in medieval and Renaissance cartography. Some researchers have suggested that this knowledge might have been preserved by a secret tradition of scholars and navigators who understood the true age and complexity of human civilization, groups who maintained libraries and archives that contained knowledge from much older sources. Knowledge that spoke of civilizations that existed during previous interglacial periods, when the geography of the Earth was very different from what we know today. Others have proposed that the knowledge might have been transmitted by Sohoza survivors of ancient catastrophes, people who witnessed the great climate changes that periodically reshape our planet, and who preserved their observations in forms that could survive the collapse of their own civilization's stories, and maps and measurements that were passed down through oral tradition and eventually recorded by later cultures who may not have fully understood the significance of what they were preserving. The mystery deepens when we consider that many of these ancient Fitz maps don't just show Antarctica, they show it in a context that suggests their creators had a global perspective on geography that should have been impossible for people of their time. They show longitude lines that weren't officially developed until the 18th century. They use projection techniques that require sophisticated mathematical knowledge, and they display an understanding of the Earth as a sphere that wasn't widely accepted in medieval Europe. This takes us into the realm of what medieval scholars called Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, a continent that philosophers and navigators had theorized must exist, not because they had seen it, but because they believed the Earth needed balance, that the weight of all the known landmasses in the north required an equal mass in the south to prevent the world from wobbling in its orbit like a spinning top, weighted on one side for centuries. This theoretical southern continent captured the imagination of explorers and dreamers. It appeared on maps as a vast landmass stretching across the bottom of the world, sometimes depicted as a paradise of gentle climates and abundant resources, sometimes as a harsh realm of ice and storm, but always as a place that called to those who couldn't resist the lure of the unknown, a place that promised answers to questions that humanity had been asking since the first curious mind looked south and wondered what lay beyond the edge of the known world. The concept of Terra Australis wasn't just geographical speculation. It was rooted in ancient philosophical and mystical traditions that saw the Earth as a living entity that maintained its own balance and harmony. These traditions, which can be traced back to Greek and Egyptian sources, suggested that the planet was designed according to sacred proportions, that its land masses and oceans were arranged in patterns that reflected cosmic harmonies, and that hidden somewhere in the southern hemisphere lay a continent that served as the Earth's foundation stone, the keystone that held the entire planetary structure in perfect equilibrium. Medieval Islamic geographers wrote extensively about this southern continent. They called it the land of the antipodes and described it as a realm where the seasons were reversed, where winter came when the northern world experienced summer, where the stars followed different paths across the sky. They spoke of it as a place of wonders and mysteries, where the normal laws of nature might be suspended, where travelers might encounter phenomena that challenged their understanding of reality itself. The Dutch explorers spoke of it in hushed tones around their campfires. They had heard stories from Arab navigators who claimed their ancestors had traded with people from the southern lands, stories of islands beyond the known world where strange plants grew and stranger animals lived, where the air itself was said to have properties that could extend human life, where the very ground was rumored to contain minerals and crystals that possessed almost magical properties. Spanish conquistadors searched for it in their quest for new lands, to claim they had heard rumors from indigenous peoples of the Americas, who spoke of lands far to the south where their ancestors had originated, lands of ice and fire, where the spirits of the dead were said to dwell, lands that could only be reached by the most skilled navigators, guided by stars that were visible only to those who possessed ancient knowledge passed down through generations of shamans and star watchers. The British Admiralty sent expedition after expedition into the southern seas, following rumors and legends, and the faint traces of ancient knowledge that suggested somewhere in those icy waters lay a continent that held secrets worth any risk to discover. Their ships carried not just supplies and equipment, but also copies of ancient maps and charts, fragments of knowledge that had been preserved in monastery libraries and private collections, clues that might lead them to the greatest geographical discovery in human history. Captain James Cook, on his second voyage of discovery, sailed further south than any European before him. He crossed the Antarctic Circle and encountered ice fields that seemed to extend beyond the horizon. He wrote in his journals of a sense that he was approaching something vast and mysterious, something that lay just beyond his ability to reach. He described the sensation of sailing toward the edge of the known world, where the familiar laws of navigation and geography seemed to blur into something more primal and unknowable. But when Antarctica was finally found, when brave souls like Cook and Bellingshausen and Palmer first glimpsed its icy shores, what they discovered was not the temperate paradise that some had imagined, but a continent so thoroughly buried in ice that it seemed more like a monument to winter itself than a place where life could exist. And yet, even in that first moment of discovery, there were hints that beneath the frozen surface lay something more complex, something that suggested this land of eternal ice was not as simple or as lifeless as it appeared. The early explorers reported strange phenomena, magnetic anomalies that caused their compasses to behave erratically, atmospheric conditions that created mirages and optical illusions, sounds that seemed to come from beneath the ice, hollow echoes that suggested vast empty spaces hidden below the surface, and lights, unexplained lights that appeared to dance across the ice fields at night, following patterns that seemed too regular to be natural aurora, but too strange to be anything human-made. Modern science has revealed that Antarctica is not merely a frozen wasteland, but a hidden world of extraordinary complexity. Beneath that seemingly uniform sheet of ice lies a landscape as varied and dramatic as any on Earth, mountain ranges that rival the Himalayas, valleys deeper than the Grand Canyon, and vast lakes, liquid lakes that have been sealed beneath the ice for millions of years, preserving in their dark, quiet depths conditions that might be similar to those that existed when life first began to evolve on our planet. Lake Vostok is perhaps the most mysterious of these hidden bodies of water, a lake larger than Lake Ontario, lying beneath more than 2 miles of solid ice in the heart of East Antarctica, a lake that has been isolated from the surface world for at least 400 years, and possibly for as long as 25 million years. Imagine that a body of water that has been cut off from our world since before the first human ancestors began to walk. Upright, a lake whose waters might contain microorganisms that have evolved in complete isolation, life forms that might represent a completely separate branch of evolution, life that might hold clues to how existence itself began. The discovery of Lake Vostok challenged everything scientists thought they knew about life's ability to survive in extreme, strange conditions. Here was a body of water that had been locked away from sunlight, from atmospheric contact, from the entire surface ecosystem for millions of years, and yet initial studies suggest that it might not be sterile. It might contain life forms that have been evolving in isolation for longer than complex life has existed anywhere else on Earth. Life forms that might have developed strategies for survival that we have never encountered before. The water in Lake Vostok is kept liquid by a combination of geothermal heat from the Earth's core and the immense pressure created by the weight of the ice above it. This creates conditions that are utterly alien to surface life. The pressure is more than 350 times greater than atmospheric pressure at sea level. The water is supersaturated with oxygen and nitrogen, and the temperature, while above freezing, exists in a range that would be lethal to most surface organisms. And yet, if life exists here, it has found ways to thrive in these impossible conditions. But Lake Vostok is not alone. Scientists have identified more than 400 subglacial lakes beneath Antarctic ice, some as large as substantial rivers. others as vast as inland seas together. These hidden bodies of water represent one of the largest freshwater systems on Earth, a network of liquid corridors and chambers that might be connected by subglacial rivers, creating a hidden ecosystem that spans thousands of square miles beneath the frozen surface. The Gamburtsoff mountain range lies buried beneath the ice, like a lost Atlantis peaks that rise to heights of nearly 12,000 feet, but which remain completely invisible from the surface, entombed beneath ice so thick that their existence was only discovered through ice-penetrating radar and gravitational mapping. These mountains, if they were not buried, would rank among the most spectacular alpine landscapes on Earth, but instead, they lie in eternal darkness, their jagged peaks reaching up toward an ice ceiling that has not felt the touch of sunlight for millions of years. What makes the Gamburtsoff Mountains particularly intriguing is their age and formation. They are ancient, even by geological standards. Having formed more than 1 billion years ago, they should have been worn down to gentle hills by now, eroded by wind and water, and the normal processes that smooth mountains over time, but instead, they retain their sharp, dramatic profiles, as if they had been perfectly preserved by the ice that covered them, as if the advancing glaciers had found them already, shaped into forms that seemed almost too perfect, too geometrically precise to be entirely natural. Rivers flow beneath the Antarctic ice, not frozen streams, but actual flowing water warmed by geothermal heat from the Earth's core, carving channels through the bedrock and carrying sediments that tell stories of a time when this continent was not locked in ice, but was part of a living, breathing world where water flowed freely under open skies, and life flourished in forms we can barely imagine. These subglacial rivers create vast networks of waterways that connect the hidden lakes and transport nutrients, and possibly even life forms across thousands of miles of buried landscape. The largest of these subglacial rivers has been traced for more than 900 miles longer than many surface rivers, flowing from the interior of the continent toward the coast, carrying with it sediments and dissolved minerals from deep within the Antarctic bedrock, and perhaps carrying other things as well, organic materials, artifacts, evidence of whatever existed on or in Antarctica before the ice came, materials that might have been preserved in the cold, dark, oxygen-free environment of these hidden waterways for millions of years. These discoveries raise questions that science is only beginning to explore. If Antarctica was once warm and green, if it supported life for millions of years before the ice came, then what kind of life might have existed there? And more intriguingly, might some form of advanced life have had time to develop, to evolve, to perhaps even build civilizations that were then buried and preserved beneath the advancing ice, like insects in amber civilizations whose remains might still be waiting in those hidden valleys and mountains and lakes, preserved in perfect condition by the very ice that destroyed their world. This is where our journey takes us, into the realm of speculation, into theories that dance on the edge between scientific possibility and imaginative wonder, theories that suggest Antarctica might hold evidence of civilizations that existed long before human beings ever walked the earth, or perhaps even more remarkably, evidence of human civilizations that existed at times and in forms that our current understanding of history cannot accommodate. Some researchers have proposed that Antarctica might be the real location of Atlantis, not the Atlantis of Plato's imagination, set in the Atlantic Ocean, but a much older, much more profound, lost civilization, one that flourished during a warm period when Antarctica was positioned differently on the globe, when its climate was temperate and its lands were green, when advanced beings might have built cities and developed technologies that we are only now beginning to match, cities that would have been preserved in perfect condition. When the Great Freeze came, locked in ice like a vast museum waiting for discovery. The theory suggests that as the continent moved toward its current polar position and the climate began to change, the inhabitants of this ancient civilization might have had time to prepare to record their knowledge, to create maps and charts and records that could be preserved and passed down through other cultures. Knowledge that might have been carried by survivors to other continents, where it was preserved in myths and legends and ancient texts that speak of lands beyond the known world, of civilizations that were destroyed by flood and ice, of gods who came from the south carrying wisdom from a time before memory. Consider the possibility that the advanced knowledge displayed in ancient cultures around the world, the sophisticated astronomy of the Maya, the precise mathematics of the Egyptians, the complex metallurgy of the Incas, the advanced architecture of megalithic builders from Easter Island to Stonehenge. What if all of these achievements were not developed independently, but were inherited from a much older source, a mother civilization that had achieved heights of knowledge and technology that were then scattered to the winds when their homeland was consumed by ice? This Antarctic civilization, according to the theory, would have been uniquely positioned to develop advanced knowledge of astronomy, navigation, and geography, living at the bottom of the world. They would have had access to star patterns and celestial phenomena that were invisible to civilizations. In the northern hemisphere, they would have been the first to understand the true shape and size of the Earth, the first to develop accurate systems of longitude and latitude, the first to create global maps that showed all the continents in their proper relationships as their world began to freeze. These ancient Antarcticans might have faced a choice similar to what modern climate scientists warn we might face in the future: adapt to radically changing conditions, migrate to more hospitable regions, or find ways to preserve their knowledge and culture for future generations who might be better equipped to understand and use it. Perhaps they chose all three options, with some groups fleeing to other continents, others adapting to the Ice Age conditions, and still others choosing to remain behind as guardians of their civilization's greatest achievements. The survivors who fled might have carried with them not just knowledge, but actual artifacts, maps, and instruments, and texts that preserved the scientific and philosophical achievements of their lost homeland. These refugees might have become the mysterious culture bearers that appear in legends around the world, the bearded white gods of Mesoamerica, the wise teachers who appeared suddenly in various cultures, with advanced knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and architecture, the legendary figures who established the great civilizations of antiquity and then disappeared, leaving behind only monuments and mysteries. Those who adapted to the changing climate might have developed technologies and survival strategies that we have yet to imagine, ways of living beneath the ice, of harnessing geothermal energy, of creating closed-loop ecosystems that could survive for thousands of years without external inputs they might have built there. Final cities in the subglacial valleys, near the thermal vents and underground rivers, creating a hidden civilization that survived the Ice Age and might, according to some theories, survive, still waiting beneath the frozen surface for the ice to retreat and their world to be reborn. The guardians, those who chose to remain as keepers of their civilization's legacy, might have constructed vast preservation facilities, libraries, and museums and storage complexes, designed to survive millions of years of ice coverage. They might have developed techniques for preserving not just knowledge, but actual genetic material, seeds and samples, and perhaps even living organisms in states of suspended animation, creating a comprehensive archive of their world that could serve as a restart kit for civilization when the Ice Age ended. The flood myths that appear in cultures all around the world, from the biblical story of Noah to the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to Native American traditions that speak of great waters that covered the earth. What if these stories are not just metaphorical or spiritual teachings, but actual memories, cultural memories of a time when the great ice caps were forming, when sea levels were rising and falling dramatically, when entire continents were being reshaped by forces so vast that they must have seemed like the work of gods to any beings who witnessed them? The Aboriginal Australians have Dreamtime stories that speak of a time when their continent was connected to other lands by bridges of ice and stone, when their ancestors could walk to places that are now separated by vast oceans, when the world was young and the geography was fluid, constantly changing as the earth found its current form. These stories, passed down through tens of thousands of years of oral tradition, might preserve actual memories of the last ice age, when sea levels were much lower and the map of the world that looked entirely different from what we know today. Satellite images of Antarctica have revealed anomalies that science has yet to fully explain, geometric shapes that appear too regular to be natural formations, structures that seem to show right angles and parallel lines in places where such patterns should not exist. What some researchers describe as pyramid-shaped mountains that rise from the ice with a symmetry that suggests they might not be mountains at all, but constructions, buildings on a scale so vast that they dwarf anything human civilization has ever attempted to build. These anomalies might have perfectly natural explanations, unusual rock formations shaped by geological processes, ice formations that create optical illusions when viewed from above, patterns that seem artificial but are actually the result of wind and weather acting on the landscape over thousands of years. And yet, the possibility remains that some of these structures might represent something more, something that challenges our assumptions about when and where intelligence first emerged on our planet. One of the most intriguing of these anomalies is a formation that appears in satellite images as a perfect pyramid, approximately 1,000 feet tall, located in the Ellsworth Mountains of Antarctica. The structure displays geometric precision that would be remarkable even for modern construction techniques. Its faces are oriented to the cardinal directions with mathematical accuracy. Its proportions follow ratios that appear in sacred architecture around the world, and its location, high on a mountain ridge, suggests it was positioned to be visible from great distances across the ice. Skeptics point out that natural processes can create pyramid-shaped formations, that wind and erosion can carve rock into geometric forms, that the human mind has a tendency to see patterns and structures, even in random formations, and they are certainly correct that not every unusual shape is evidence of artificial construction. But the question remains, if even one of these anomalies proves to be artificial, what would that mean for our understanding of Earth's history? Other satellite images show what appear to be extensive linear features beneath the ice, straight lines that extend for dozens of miles, intersecting patterns that look like road networks, or canal systems, circular formations that resemble city layouts or large-scale architectural plans. These features are visible only through ice-penetrating radar and ground-penetrating sensing equipment, which means they represent structures or formations that lie deep beneath the surface, buried under ice that has been in place for thousands or possibly millions of years. Some researchers have identified what they interpret as the remains of artificial structures scattered across the Antarctic landscape, walls and foundations, and architectural elements that display construction techniques and materials that seem too sophisticated for the time periods when they would have been built. If indeed they were built by any civilization we currently recognize, these structures, if they are artificial, would represent engineering achievements that rival or exceed anything accomplished by known ancient civilizations. The most controversial of these claims involves structures that appear to show evidence of advanced metallurgy and precision stone cutting techniques that would require tools and knowledge that supposedly didn't exist until modern times. Yet, the context in which these structures are found suggests they are far older than modern civilization. They are buried beneath layers of ice and sediment that would have taken thousands of years to accumulate. They show weathering patterns consistent with extreme age, and they are integrated into geological formations in ways that suggest they have been in place for far longer than human civilization is supposed to have existed. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed vast underground complexes beneath certain areas of Antarctica. Chambers and tunnels and spaces that appear to be artificially constructed rather than naturally formed. These underground areas show architectural features like right angles, parallel walls, and regular spacing that are characteristic of deliberate construction rather than random geological processes. Some of these complexes appear to extend for miles beneath the surface, suggesting underground cities or facilities of enormous scope and sophistication. The thermal signature of Antarctica adds another layer to these mysteries. Infrared satellite imaging shows heat sources beneath the ice that cannot be fully explained by known geological processes, while geothermal activity accounts for some of these heat signatures. Others appear in patterns and locations that suggest artificial sources, areas where the ice is thinner than it should be, where the surface temperature is higher than surrounding regions, where something beneath the ice appears to be generating heat in ways that natural geology cannot explain. Perhaps most intriguingly, some of these thermal anomalies appear to pulse or vary in intensity over time, as if they are connected to systems that are still active, still functioning after thousands or millions of years. Beneath the ice, this raises the extraordinary possibility that whatever created these heat sources might not be merely preserved beneath the ice, but might still be operational, still carrying out whatever functions they were designed to perform, waiting in the darkness for conditions to change or for discovery by minds capable of understanding their purpose. During the 20th century, Antarctica became a stage for intrigue. Military operations like Operation High Jump, the Antarctic Treaty, and restricted zones feed speculation about what governments might know about this continent that they are not sharing with the public. This is where our story intersects with the realm of official secrecy and the possibility that the most significant discoveries about Antarctica are being kept classified for reasons that go far beyond simple scientific curiosity. Operation High Jump in 1946-1947 saw the largest Antarctic expedition in history, led by Admiral Richard Byrd and involving thousands of personnel and dozens of ships and aircraft, officially described as a research mission, but conducted with a level of secrecy and military precision that has fueled decades of speculation about what was really being sought in those frozen wastes. The operation involved more resources than many actual military campaigns, with advanced equipment and experienced personnel who were sworn to secrecy about their activities and observations. Byrd himself, in interviews and diary entries that have been preserved, spoke of his Antarctic expeditions in terms that seemed to suggest he had encountered something extraordinary, something that challenged his understanding of geography and possibility. He wrote of lands beyond the pole, of regions where the normal rules of navigation seemed not to apply, of discoveries that were so significant they could change the world's understanding of itself. But what exactly he found, if anything, remains locked in classified files and official silence. The expedition's official reports describe routine mapping and scientific activities, but there are hints of something more. References to unusual magnetic readings, reports of equipment malfunctions in specific locations, accounts of aerial surveys that revealed surface features that didn't match existing maps, and personnel accounts that speak of a sense that they were being watched, that there was something beneath the ice that was aware of their presence and perhaps not entirely pleased by their intrusion. The timing of Operation High Jump is significant, coming just after World War II, when military leaders were acutely aware of the strategic importance of advanced technology and the possibility that enemy nations might have developed capabilities that exceeded their own if rumors of advanced technology or unusual phenomena in Antarctica had reached military intelligence. It would have been natural for them to mount a comprehensive investigation, and equally natural for them to classify any discoveries that might have military or strategic implications. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959 established the continent as a zone of international cooperation dedicated to peaceful scientific research, but it also created restrictions on exploration and development that some see as suspiciously comprehensive. Why, they ask, would such detailed limitations be necessary for a continent that is supposedly nothing but ice and rock? What might lie beneath that ice that requires such careful control over who can go where and what they can do when they get there? The treaty specifically prohibits military activities, nuclear testing, and the disposal of nuclear waste in Antarctica. It establishes territorial claims as suspended rather than resolved, and it creates a framework for international oversight of all activities on the continent. These provisions make sense from an environmental and diplomatic perspective, but they also create a structure that could effectively control access to any discoveries that might be made beneath the ice, ensuring that such discoveries would be managed by international consensus rather than being exploited by individual nations. Certain areas of Antarctica remain off-limits to civilian researchers and tourists. These restricted zones are officially explained as being necessary for environmental protection or safety reasons, but their locations sometimes correspond to areas where satellite imagery has revealed unusual features or where military expeditions have conducted classified activities. The restrictions are enforced by international agreement, with severe penalties for unauthorized access, creating an effective barrier around whatever might exist in these sensitive areas. The scientific research that is conducted in Antarctica is subject to unusual levels of coordination and oversight. Researchers must obtain permits from multiple international bodies. Their activities are monitored by representatives from various governments, and their findings are often subject to review before publication. While this system is officially designed to ensure environmental protection and international cooperation, it also creates a framework that could control the release of information about any discoveries that might have broader implications than simple scientific research. There are persistent reports from researchers and support personnel who have worked in Antarctica of discoveries that were not included in official reports. Artifacts that were quietly removed from dig site structures that were photographed but never mentioned in published papers. Areas that were suddenly declared off-limit after unusual discoveries were made. While these reports are often dismissed as rumors or misunderstandings, they contribute to a sense that the full story of Antarctic exploration is not being told to the public. The technological capabilities that are employed in Antarctic research are sometimes more advanced than what would seem necessary for routine scientific work. Deep drilling equipment that can penetrate miles of ice, sophisticated radar systems that can map underground features in extraordinary detail, communication systems that are more robust than what most civilian research would require. This advanced equipment suggests that the research being conducted might be more comprehensive and more sensitive than official descriptions would indicate. Here, the story broadens to the cycles of Earth, ice ages, sudden climate shifts, and global catastrophes that erase civilizations. Antarctica becomes a symbol of how entire worlds can vanish, not just in myth but in the real rhythms of geology and time. Our planet has experienced numerous mass extinction events throughout its history. Periods when the dominant life forms were swept away and entirely new forms of life emerged to fill the empty ecological niches. The Younger Dryas period, approximately 12,000 years ago, was a time of dramatic climate change, a period when the Earth's temperature fluctuated wildly, when ice sheets advanced and retreated, when the geography of coastlines changed almost overnight in geological terms. It was during this period that many large mammals went extinct, when human civilization, as we know it, began to emerge from the hunter-gatherer phase, and when, according to some theories, earlier advanced civilizations might have been destroyed by the rapidly changing climate. This period coincides with flood myths from cultures around the world, stories that speak of great waters that covered the earth, of civilizations that were destroyed by rising seas, of survivors who preserved knowledge and genetic material to restart civilization after the waters receded. These myths might preserve actual memories of the chaos that ensued when massive ice sheets collapsed and ocean currents shifted, creating climate changes that would have seemed apocalyptic to any civilizations that existed at the time. The evidence for rapid climate change during this period is preserved in ice cores, sediment layers, and geological formations around the world. These records show that temperatures could change by as much as 10 degrees Celsius within a few decades, that precipitation patterns could shift dramatically from one year to the next, that entire ecosystems could collapse and be replaced by completely different forms of life within a single generation, changes that would have made long-term planning and stable civilization extremely difficult to maintain. If advanced civilizations existed before the Younger Dryas event, they would have faced challenges that we can barely imagine, not just the immediate effects of climate change, but the secondary effects of ecosystem collapse, food shortages, population displacement, and social chaos that would have accompanied such dramatic environmental shifts. Some of these civilizations might have had enough warning to prepare to create preservation systems and survival strategies, while others might have been caught off guard and destroyed completely. Antarctica, with its unique position and geological stability, might have served as a refuge during these catastrophic periods. Its location at the South Pole would have made it less susceptible to some types of climate variation. Its geological foundation is among the most stable on Earth, making it less likely to be affected by earthquakes or volcanic activity, and its eventual ice cover would have created perfect preservation conditions for any civilization that chose to wait out the chaos in underground facilities. The concept of cyclical catastrophes is supported by evidence from many different fields of study. Astronomy shows that our solar system passes through regions of space with varying levels of cosmic radiation and debris. Geology reveals patterns of magnetic pole reversals and massive volcanic events that occur on regular schedules. Climatology demonstrates that ice ages and interglacial periods follow predictable cycles based on orbital mechanics and solar activity. All of these factors suggest that civilizations on Earth must periodically face existential challenges that require extraordinary measures to survive. If intelligent life has existed on Earth for longer than we currently believe, then it would have had to develop strategies for surviving these cyclical catastrophes. Some might have chosen to disperse across multiple continents, spreading their population and knowledge to ensure that some groups would survive regional disasters. Others might have focused on developing technology that could survive extreme conditions, and some might have chosen Antarctica as the ideal location for long-term preservation, knowing that its ice would provide protection from radiation, temperature extremes, and the social chaos that accompanies civilizational collapse. The timing of these cycles might explain why evidence of earlier civilizations is so difficult to find. If advanced societies arise during interglacial periods and are then destroyed or forced into hiding during ice ages, then most of their surface traces would be erased by the advancing glaciers. Only those sites that were specifically designed for preservation, or that were protected by unique geographical circumstances, would survive to be discovered by later civilizations. And Antarctica, with its permanent ice cover and restricted access, would be the ideal location for such preservation sites. This cyclical model of civilization also suggests that human knowledge and technology might not follow a simple, linear progression from primitive to advanced instead. There might be periods of great achievement followed by dark ages, when knowledge is lost and technology regresses. The advanced astronomical knowledge displayed by ancient cultures, the sophisticated engineering techniques used in megalithic construction, the precise mathematical relationships found in ancient architecture, all of these might represent not the beginning of human achievement, but the remnants of much older traditions that had been partially preserved through previous cycles of collapse and recovery. The closing chapter gathers the threads into a soft meditation, not on definitive answers, but on the weight of mystery. Itself, Antarctica becomes less a place than a mirror for humanity's longing to know what lies beyond our reach, a frozen silence that invites imagination, and perhaps that is the most profound truth of all, that in a universe as vast and ancient as ours, there will always be mysteries waiting to be discovered, always frontiers that call to the curious mind, always secrets hidden just beyond the reach of current knowledge. What we know about Antarctica is remarkable enough, a continent larger than the United States and Mexico combined, covered by ice sheets that contain 70% of the world's fresh water, home to unique ecosystems that have evolved in complete isolation, a place where the normal rules of life and survival are pushed to their absolute limits, a continent that plays a crucial role in regulating Earth's climate and ocean currents. Yet what we don't know about Antarctica might be even more remarkable. Beneath that pristine surface lie landscapes. We have never seen mountains that have stood in darkness for millions of years, valleys that might contain ecosystems unlike anything else on Earth, lakes that might harbor life forms that evolved in complete isolation from the rest of the biosphere. And perhaps, just perhaps, artifacts and ruins that could rewrite our understanding of intelligence and civilization on this planet. The questions that Antarctica raises are not just about geography or geology or biology. They are about the nature of knowledge itself, about how much we can really know about our own planet, about the possibility that entire chapters of Earth's history might be missing from our understanding, about the humbling realization that despite all our technology and exploration, there are still places on our world that remain fundamentally mysterious. Antarctica forces us to confront the limitations of human knowledge. We can send satellites to map its surface. We can drill through its ice to sample its hidden lakes. We can use radar to peer through miles of frozen water. Yet even with all these tools, the continent keeps its secrets. The ice is too thick in most places, the conditions too harsh for extensive exploration, the area too vast to be comprehensively surveyed. And perhaps that is as it should be. There is something profound about the existence of genuine mystery in our modern world, in an age when we can look up any fact instantly, when satellite imagery shows us every corner of the globe, when science seems to have explanations for most phenomena. Antarctica remains genuinely unknowable in ways that stir something deep in the human imagination. It reminds us that the universe is larger and stranger than we can comprehend, that there are still wonders waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to venture into the unknown, whether or not there are ancient civilizations buried beneath Antarctic ice, whether or not those satellite anomalies represent artificial structures, whether or not the continent holds archaeological treasures that could revolutionize history. The simple fact that these possibilities exist is perhaps the most important truth of all in a universe as vast and ancient as ours. Anything is possible, and the most extraordinary discoveries might be waiting in the most unlikely places. The ice of Antarctica will eventually reveal its secrets, perhaps not in our lifetimes, but eventually, as climate continues to change and technology continues to advance, as international cooperation makes more comprehensive exploration possible, as new generations of researchers develop tools and techniques that can penetrate deeper into the frozen continent's mysteries. When that time comes, we may discover that our planet's history is far more complex and wonderful than we ever imagined. Until then, Antarctica remains what it has always been, a place of mystery and possibility, a continent-sized question mark at the bottom of our world, a reminder that no matter how much we think we know, there are still frontiers to explore, still mysteries to solve, still wonders waiting to be discovered by those who refuse to accept that all the great discoveries have already been made. So, as you drift toward sleep tonight, wherever you are in the world, let your imagination carry you south, past the familiar territories of your daily life, past the warm lands where most of humanity lives, toward that distant continent of ice and silence, and consider the possibility that beneath all that pristine whiteness, preserved in perfect frozen stillness, lie answers to questions we haven't yet learned. How to ask secrets that have been waiting patiently through millions of years of ice and wind and darkness for the right moment to reveal themselves to minds capable of understanding their significance. The mystery of Antarctica is not just about what might be hidden beneath its ice. It's about the mystery of time itself, about the vast story of our planet that stretches back through eons we can barely comprehend, about the possibility that intelligence and civilization might be far older and far stranger than we have ever imagined, and about the profound truth that in a universe as vast and ancient as ours, there is always more to discover, always another layer of mystery waiting beneath the surface of what we think we know. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be filled with visions of ice and time and the patient secrets that wait at the edge of the world, where the silence is so deep that it seems to whisper of things that were, and things that might still be, hidden in the frozen heart of our most mysterious continent.